Chris Wallace here, advisor to men, mentor at large. I want to talk about a subject that's really kind of tricky. And it's the idea of having more children. And where does a man fit in with that whole situation? You know, we get a lot of questions from men who are in long-term relationships and either don't want children or don't want any more. And often there are already kids in the picture, sometimes in the immediate family and other times from previous relationships. Since men are called upon to be the primary providers in many households, since she actually carries a child and nurses it once it's born, we can understand when a man says, "Hey, I can't afford another failed relationship. I'm out of the baby-making business forever." You have to respect the guy who says that. I mean, who can blame a guy who has been paying child support and may continue to pay for many, many years if he says, enough is enough? It's just that that man has choices to make about his partner. That's the facts. He's aware of his reasons and can then ensure that he doesn't unknowingly get trapped into fatherhood. And I'd suggest that using that language, trapped, could be part of the problem. There's no trap. Let's be clear about that. I won't pretend to be objective, like any of us could anyways. My mother had 10 pregnancies in 12 years. Good Irish Newfoundland stock. 9 survived, so I grew up with lots of siblings. Later, when as an adult trying to have more kids with my wife who had medical issues, I asked my dad about all of these children, and he said, "Well, son, babies don't take up that much space, and there's always room for one more." I remember thinking, well, that's how I got all these brothers and sisters. We had one son, and my ex was unable to have more. Made him more precious, and he's a fine young man. I will tell you, there is no greater feeling or surprise to have your grown son reach across and punch somebody in the face who's giving his dad a hard time in a bar. I'd have 10 more kids like that if I could, although I don't drink anymore. Our children are there for us as we age, hopefully, and the drive to have them is strong in both women and men. Men are honored someone would want to have their child, perhaps alleviating some of the shame many of us feel as we're brought up. It says we are worth it, or it says that we will do, already no small thing. So whichever way it happens, in the end, the payoff is this: we get to be somebody's hero. Is there anything better? I don't think so. I was 5 years in with my current missus when our roommate took me aside one evening in the kitchen. She was making me lemon meringue pie, and she asked me about my experiences of fatherhood. I told her that being a father had largely defined me as a man. It was true. If you've ever read my Epiphany, you'll know. My boy, in so many ways, saved my life. After establishing my views on fatherhood, my clever little sister asked me if I'd ever do it again, as she shoved a near perfect slice of pie before me on the table. I had just told her how wonderful it was to be a dad, so I hesitated, in the way a man does when he knows he's being led but can't quite figure out how, and so has no sense on how to back out. Instead, I blurted out, "Of course I would. It was wonderful." Such hubris. She let that sit for a moment while I ate my pie. I had an eerie feeling, a bit like I was being conditioned, like Pavlov's dog. Then she said, "Well, you better talk to your gal." I often tell of the conversation that followed, asking my gal about it. my utterances seeded with male ego as I told her I didn't blame her for wanting to have my child. She mentioned the pills were hard to remember to take, and she was concerned about artificially changing the hormones in her body. I told her I'd get her a dog. Looking hurt for just a split second, I added if she did well with the dog, I'd let her have my child. She accepted this plan. Sure enough, she was so good with the dog, I got her for her birthday, becoming an expert trainer and dog walker for others while at it. How could I say no to a baby? We have 2 kids now. She lost the first pregnancy at a miscarriage. Then she had a perfect baby girl second time around. And she wasn't prepared, but she got pregnant again, and we had a boy. He was a high-risk delivery and has a typed page full of issues, but none we can't manage. She was done with it, though, saying she didn't feel as though she could impose another difficult child upon the world. I respected her decision, but I was prepared to go either way. About 2 years later, now over 60, I went and made an appointment to have a vasectomy while she was at Sick Kids in Toronto with the boy for his heart surgery. I made the appointment, not I had the procedure. About 2 months later, when she was settled in here in this old house out in the country, she drove me to the clinic and then went off to Walmart with the kids. I refused the pain meds and tranquilizer, and the procedure was over so quickly, it took her a while to get back and get me. I sat on a curb out in the sun in September and allowed the significance of it all just to wash over me. I felt it in more ways than one. No one asks me why I'd have kids so late in life. If they have, I don't remember the conversation. If there is one thing that I know about women, and I know a few things, it's that their having a child or children is part of her destiny. It's more than that. It's her hero's journey. Those always involve transcending the self for the sake of another or for a greater good. Broadly speaking, men have war. Women have babies. Do women ask men not to go off to war? Think about that. When I asked Mrs. what she was thinking during those months prior to having our daughter, she told me all she could see in her mind's eye was an image of her holding a baby. This preoccupied her thoughts and her dreams. Not immune to slow progress on pure personal maturation, rationalizing selfishness, or imposing my will on others, I had to ask myself just who I thought I was to even consider denying her this essential part of her existence. If Mrs. wanted 10 children, I'd have kept my boys well nourished and replenished and done my duty to her and for her, regardless of circumstances. I knew what was involved, and I had the experience of my first marriage to go on. I know there is sacrifice and inconvenience and sometimes heartbreak. And that's also life. I dare anyone to name me something else humans do that somehow overshadows bringing new life into the world. What? Not going to get as much golf in on the weekends? Might have to forego drinking or whatever other carousing might fancy us? Will it mean our lives then revolve around the care and nourishment of another? Is that such a bad thing? More importantly, what's in it for you? In my case, that's an easy answer. A lot. Perhaps as much as everything. To each his own. But I will tell you this. My son forced me to look at myself for the first time as a man, and not as the lingering boy I was. And each child does it at yet another level of depth. With each lesson I taught him, I was invited to examine deeply whether that lesson had taken hold of me or was just a superficial aspect of life, one to which I had paid lip service at best. It was like a daily in-depth review before an exam. It was a retesting constantly. Fatherhood allowed me to clearly see the faults of my parents, if only to avoid allowing their mistakes to rain down upon an innocent who is now in my care. You see, it fell to me to protect that boy, no one else. It was my duty, it was my calling. And with my daughter and son now, again, it's my destiny. It was as if the heavens had opened up and sent a bolt of lightning down into my heart and energized me with the kind of determination a man needs to fight and overcome a war. Only the war was within me. You know I taught my son plenty, he even says so. But what he taught me was more. What my daughter teaches me is more. Little girls teach men about love. I'm 62 years old with an 8-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. People are far and above respectful, if not sometimes amazed about it. Why would I do it again? I'd say it was because I had more to teach. Of course, you can take that as code for I had more to learn. I repeat, I had more to learn. Once you understand projection, you operate from a much, much deeper wisdom. These children have taught me so much more than I ever could have fathomed on my own. Just as Mrs. rising to her role in life has acted as a catalyst for my growth. The good ones are like that, women who help men become better men. Often, that is through shared parenting. Let me add that I've tested my missus, and she's low in agreeableness. Oh yes, she's no dumb blonde. The thing is, she's loyal to me, and a man will do almost anything for a loyal woman. Ends of the earth kinds of things. We seem to be built that way. A man with a loyal woman at his side has the wind at his back if he stays out in front of her to feel it. In my decades of advising folks, I've never seen a woman give up the idea of having a child willingly. I'm sure it happens and common sense must prevail in some cases. It's just, I've never seen it. Ever. I have witnessed and continue to witness marriages and relationships break up over this issue. I know of a case right now where a woman is leaving a wonderful man because he cannot have children and adoption is not possible with his record. Her girlfriend said, "Keep the man and go get pregnant." She refused. They split up. Sad as it is, I respect her for it. Women instinctively know this is of the highest priority. And all of your lamentations and excuses are bullshit. Mostly she's right. That is always the underlying caveat to any pair bond. If she wants kids, that takes precedence. Always has. Who are we trying to fool here? Let me give you some background. Rightly or wrongly, the "it takes two to tango" idea of pregnancy responsibility is a bit of a sham. A woman is always responsible for contraception. And let me explain why. Can a man force a woman to have a baby she doesn't want? No, he cannot. That's been decided, notably in a famous Quebec court case decades ago. The courts will not force a woman to have a baby she does not want. And nor should they. We're not living in Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, some kind of fantasy. Yet she can't have it both ways. If she is 100% responsible for her body, she is fully responsible for what goes in it. Where we get hung up is when a man is held responsible for a baby he didn't want or even know that was in the works, and sometimes with an explicit agreement in place from her that no children were planned. It takes two to tango, one side will say. Nonsense. It's just that the courts decide for the child, who cannot speak for itself. Who's responsible for the pregnancy is a moot point. It's irrelevant. And that is the risk every man faces, isn't it? Might not be fair, but life isn't fair. You'll get no sympathy from the courts, despite your expectations. Courts rule for children. That can seem like ruling for mother, but it's not. It's a ruling for motherhood. Why would a society rule against its own interests? Why would the crown turn away a homegrown subject who can perhaps act in defense of the realm one day? You see, it's not going to happen. Parents don't own their children. The state does. I know if I expect to be a long-term partner to my gal, I will make sacrifices to be with her. For example, we both need presence and loyalty. Are you there? Are you with me? Part of her idea of loyalty from me is that I agree to facilitate her destiny as she sees it, and this one issue is entirely hers to decide. If not, I agree to let her go. That's the key thing about relationships. Most things aren't resolvable. The 30% of things that are amenable to change must be seized upon with zeal and worked out, if only for precedent's sake. Perhaps as rewards, but also as glimpses into what is possible. The rest of the deeper stuff needs pillow talk, says the Gottmans. That's where you talk about what each other's want out of life and how you will each help the other get it. I've found these are worthwhile. It's where the old programs we carry can sometimes be carefully brought to light and modified, if not abandoned, for a new way forward. Not always, but the more pillow talk you have, the better it is. In a perfect world, couples discuss children and decide to have them as a joint decision. Yet we don't always live in that kind of ideal, do we? So what do we do when an impasse develops? Well, men and women have always banded together to benefit from each other's strengths and shore up each other's weaknesses. We're a complementary set of genders, and by and large, those differences between us are where the challenge and all the fun resides. In my opinion, to have or not have children is ultimately her call. Why? It's her body. It's her destiny and her journey. No man should ever fool himself into thinking he has a say in any of that. If he did, it would mean it is implied that he has a form of sovereignty over her physical being. Where those days might have existed and continue to exist in places in the world, they are rightly long gone in the West. And that's based on my experience and after watching other couples for decades. My role is to stand by her, for better or for worse, and do the best I can for us all. It's up to me to lead her in such a way that she gets what she wants while I get what I want. That's my challenge. She can have children with you, or she can have them without you. You get to decide that part. It's always a compromise when it comes to the ancillary issues of day-to-day living. Where men can truly lead is by having conversations and getting agreement about putting each other first, about your sex lives, diet, nutrition, parenting style, and allowing your family to flourish while remaining flexible. These are some of the ways a father's adaptability can really shine. Meaning is what we make of things. And when men fail to accept the king energy, the risk is to descend into the shadow aspects of male maturation. These include the tyrant and the weakling abdicator. Scratch a tyrant, you'll find a weakling. Press a weakling and you'll find a tyrant, according to the two Jungian analysts, Moore and Gillette. Let me tell you how they see it. They say the king energy in fullness has two main functions. The first is order. The second is fertility and blessings. In modern families where there is an absence of a strong male figure, or a father who is beset with immaturity or weakness, unless the mother can harness and express a powerful queen energy equivalent to the king's power, disorder and chaos often ensue. Furthermore, let me quote them. The king archetype in its fullness possesses the qualities of order, or reasonable and rational patterning, or integration and integrity in the masculine psyche. It stabilizes chaotic emotion and out-of-control behaviors. It gives stability and centeredness. It brings calm. And in its fertilizing and centeredness, it mediates vitality, life force, and joy. It brings maintenance and balance. It defends our own sense of central calmness about who we are, our essential unassailability, and certainly our certainty and masculine identity. They go on. It looks upon the world with a firm but kindly eye. It sees others in all their weaknesses and in all their talent and worth. It honors and promotes them. It guides them and nurtures them towards their fullness as beings. It is not envious because it is secure as the king in its own worth. It rewards and encourages creativity in us and others. The king in fullness energy uses the warrior archetype centrally to express aggressive might when order is threatened. It uses the magician archetype aspects to solve problems from a deep wisdom. It's clever. It uses the lover in fullness powers to see the awe in those around us and to express delight by way of praise and encouragement and specific actions to improve everyone's lives. The king is procreative and cares for the whole realm, both of its people and of nature. He is generative and willingly steps up to facilitate the growth of those around him. He is the voice that affirms clearly and calmly and with authority the human rights of all, say Moore and Gillette. You have seen me write that a man who uses his power in service of himself and others find meaning and freedom. It is by using your king energy that you create a life of meaning, not of ease or devoid of hardship, for these are foolhardy expectations. It is your use of your force used for good, a power which praises far more than it punishes. It is a voice from within which answers the calling of the Spirit, the voice of a man's ancestors blending with his own as he creates a life. This is the voice of true self, right at the cusp of sacred and profane, that purgatory between heaven and hell, between mystery and life. I don't know what you'll decide regarding your babies. I haven't a clue what you might think of my appeal. But if I have a loyal woman by my side, a mere baby will not deter me from my purpose nor my devotion. Let her bring me heirs and add to our tribe, I say. I will teach them all I know and learn from them and from her. Stay powerful. Never give up. Chris Wallace, Advisor to Men, Mentor at Large.